Hydration, something so important, but many of us aren't getting right. Firstly, what counts towards your fluid requirements each day? Well, it's not just water, but the likes of tea and coffee do count towards your fluid intake each day, as well as the likes of milk and juices and smoothies. Really, anything you can soak up through a straw. When it comes to fluid requirements, how much do we need? Well, there's simple kind of estimations that you can use. So if you know your body weight in kilos, if you times that by 25 to 35, you kind of get an idea of ish how much fluid you need each day. But when it comes to fluids, it's important to monitor your own hydration. So, firstly, we need to drink to avoid thirst. As soon as we're thirsty, we're already a bit dehydrated. When it comes to thirst and drinking to thirst, just be aware that some of us aren't as sensitive to the feeling of thirst as much as other people are. So, for example, older people or very young people, when it's hot out, when we're sick, for example, or sometimes with athletes might not be as sensitive to the sensation of thirst. So, get your weight in kilos times by 25 to 35. That gives you an idea of how much you need each day, but also monitor your hydration by avoiding thirst, aiming for pale colored urine. And you should need to pee every few hours, and you should be producing a decent volume. When it comes to hydration, we lose water through lots of different ways. Okay, so we lose water through breathing, and the more we breathe and the more we talk, the more water we can lose. We lose water through sweating and as well as peeing and a little bit in our poo. So there's lots of different ways we can lose water from our body, but we can gain it not just through fluids, but also through turning food into energy in our body. We gain water that way, but we also gain water through the food that we eat. That said, and I can only attest to the evidence in Ireland, we know that around for most women are under consuming fluids by a half a litre, if not a little bit more, and men by nearly a litre each day. When it comes to fluid requirements, like I said, tea and coffee does count, but I do want you to be, I suppose, mindful of the caffeine content of tea and coffee. So a cup of tea usually has around 50 milligrams of caffeine, while a cup of coffee has about 100 milligrams. Now, cups of coffee can range from about that to all the way up to 600 milligrams in a cup. Like, that does happen. But I just want you to be mindful of caffeine and the likes of ill effects from caffeine. So it can make some people jittery and anxious. It can send some people's blood pressure up, especially if they're not used to drinking coffee, and it can increase heart rate, and it can also have a negative impact on some people's guts. So a cup of coffee will stimulate the gut to move as much as a really big meal. And when it comes to coffee, it's not actually just to do with the caffeine. Decaf will still stimulate your gut to move, only a little bit less than caffeinated coffee. So with coffee and gut interactions, it's not just to do with the caffeine. But caffeine and the impact on sleep is important. It can affect your ability to go off to sleep, as well as your ability to get restful sleep. So generally speaking, when it comes to cups of caffeinated coffee, we want to make sure that we're drinking those at least 8 hours before bed. But when it comes to super high doses, as found in energy drinks or pre-workouts, that we want to aim to have them at least 13 hours before sleep if we don't want our sleep to be affected. For people who are listening and going, oh, I can drink coffee and go to sleep, no bother, perhaps so, but it might be affecting your ability to get into restful, deep sleep. So when it comes to fluid requirements, there's lots of different ways to meet it. But just know that even 2% dehydration can affect your cognitive function. So your ability to think, the speed and accuracy of thought. It can also affect other things in the body, such as putting you at risk of constipation and UTIs. Hydration is the most important bit in terms of having a healthy diet. Okay, what I mean by that is, really, if we aren't well hydrated, so if we stop drinking water now, we wouldn't be here in 2 weeks time. Okay, it's really critical. It has you can argue from that point that it's more important than even food. Not that food isn't important, but it just means we can live a little bit longer without it. So water, you could argue, is the most important nutrient. So do try and make sure you're well hydrated each day. You might find if you go from not focusing in on hydration to focusing in on hydration, that your energy levels will greatly improve. When increasing your fluid requirements, do so slowly so that you don't spend all the time peeing. And also focus in on increasing your fluid requirements or your fluid intake in the first half of the day. Because if you come home from work, just say, and you scull a loads of water and trying to meet your requirements for the day, you might end up waking up a lot at night to pee, and no one wants that. Okay, so hopefully you learned a little bit about hydration, and I didn't go off on too many tangents, but that you actually now realize it's important and are going to try and prioritize it a little bit more.